5 hours before the wave hits, sirens and police loudspeakers have already told every street in downtown Hilo to get out. By 10 minutes to 1 in the morning, the city is still full of people because somewhere in those 5 hours, someone told them it was over. On a bridge over the Wailuku River, geologist Jerry Eaton watches Hilo Bay drain to bare mud, then hears a roar building out of the dark. A 20-foot wall of water is about to grind the city's commercial heart to nothing and take 61 people with it. Every one of them following the last voice they trusted. At 9:11 a.m. Hawaii time on May 22nd, an earthquake measuring 9.5 strikes off the southern coast of Chile, the largest ever recorded by instruments. Within hours, seismographs in Hawaii pick up the long, characteristic oscillations that have traveled the length of the Pacific. By evening, the math is done. The U.S. Coast and Geodetic Survey knows the wave is crossing the ocean and knows almost exactly when it will reach Hilo, around midnight. At 6:47 p.m., the official warning goes out. The city has more than 5 hours to clear the shoreline. The arrival time calculation will hold to within the hour. The signal meant to carry that warning down to the people on the street will not. A few months earlier, Hawaii's civil defense changed the siren protocol. 3 signals in sequence: stand by, evacuate, the wave is coming, become 1. Now, a single siren means immediate evacuation, full stop, and no second signal is coming. Almost no one in Hilo knows the rule changed. The new instructions settled into agency paperwork and never made it onto a street corner. At 8:30 p.m., the sirens along the Hilo waterfront go off, intermittently for about 20 minutes. They work exactly right, exactly as the new protocol requires. Most residents are still thinking in the old categories and hear it as stage 1, a signal to get ready, not to run. By 9, the sirens stop and never sound again that night. To anyone still holding the old model, the silence reads one way. The alert is over. It's safe to go back. The state warning stays in effect all night. It's just that nobody in the city makes another sound to remind anyone of that. In the outlying neighborhoods, the warning is still moving. Police cars drive the streets with loudspeakers, repeating the same line. Tidal wave expected. Move to higher ground. Tell your neighbors. But that voice is drowning in everything else on the air. On local stations KHBC, Kipa, and Kimo, the DJs aren't staying quiet either. Some are just filling airtime with unverified chatter. Others are telling listeners the wave missed the islands entirely. The official warning, the police bullhorn, and the reassuring voice on the radio are all playing in the same city at the same moment, out of different windows and different cars. And in any given house, the voice that wins is the one people would rather hear. In a later account, included by the U.S. Geological Survey in its material on tsunami survival, one evening of this night is documented in more detail than the rest. 16-year-old Carol Brown and her brother Ernest Diama hear the sirens with their parents. The family splits up right away. Their parents load the car with whatever matters most and head for higher ground, while Carol and Ernest turn the other way. They need to pick up a niece staying with relatives outside town. The drive there takes less than half an hour, but the night manages to change completely in that half hour. Heading back into Hilo, they hear a radio report. The waves hitting the city are only about 7 feet. Which station broadcast that figure was never established, but for 2 teenagers in a car, it's enough to stop being afraid. At the edge of town, a police officer stops them and says the danger has passed. No one canceled the official alert that night. This is one man's word on one road, said with good intentions most likely. Carol and Ernest believe him and keep driving toward their sister's house in a low district right on the canal, the exact spot where the water will run highest a few hours from now. They reach the house well after midnight and stay there with their sister's family, waiting out the night. At least 8 waves will move through the bay before the night is over, but none of that matters yet. The first 2 only reinforce the sense that the alarm was for nothing. At 12:13 a.m., the water rises 4 feet above normal. Noticeable, not destructive. At 12:46 a.m., the second wave arrives, 9 feet. It floods the lower streets, but the city holds. On the radio, the DJs soften their tone. Reports from Tahiti say the waves there were only about 3 feet. The reef took the force out of them. People come back out to look at the flooded streets. Fishermen walk down to the exposed mud of the harbor floor to gather up the fish stranded there before the water rises again. At 10 minutes to 1, the bay does the same thing the sirens did 4 hours earlier. It goes silent. The water pulls back past the reef, bearing the bottom, and this time, nobody in Hilo has learned to read the signal, because nobody has had reason to see it before. On the bridge, the roar Eaton hears is already the wave taking its final shape. The cause is the shape of the bay itself. Hilo sits inside a natural funnel, narrow, curved, shallowing toward shore, and that funnel behaves differently depending on how much water is in it. The first 2 waves moved through it as a gradual rise. The bay was full enough to absorb their energy. An emptied, drained bay works differently. When the third wave enters it, the base of the wave slams into friction against the exposed bottom and slows hard, while the crest keeps moving at full speed. The front outruns its own base and tips forward, curling over itself. A gentle swell turns into a wall that's nearly vertical. At the bridge, where Eaton is standing, the wall is already 20 feet high and still climbing. Farther along, where the shoreline reflects the wave back into itself and stacks it higher, the water rises to nearly 35 feet above sea level, taller than a 3-story building. The wall hits Hilo's commercial district along Kamehameha Avenue, the packed, built-up business heart of the city, and takes all of it down. Concrete building foundations are ground to dust, as if they'd never been there. At radio station Kimo, the clock stops at 1:06 a.m., jammed by the water at the moment of impact, and stays frozen on that minute, marking, for anyone who finds it later, the exact second the center of the city stopped existing. At the house by the canal, where Carol and Ernest arrived a few hours earlier on one policeman's word, the water doesn't knock. The house tears free of its foundation whole, with everyone still inside, and rides the current through the block, past fences and neighbors' gates ripped off their hinges, through a darkness where it's impossible to tell which way the city is moving. Everyone inside survives. The number they heard on the radio, 7 feet, turns out to be a fraction of what actually came into the city that night. By 3 a.m., Hawaii's governor calls up the National Guard. Patrols work through the rest of the night and into the following morning, recovering bodies from under the wreckage of the commercial district and from the water pooled in flooded yards on the low streets. The night turns into a methodical sweep, block by block. The first count from those sweeps is 57. 4 more die later in area hospitals from their injuries, and the final number settles at 61 and stays there. Hilo's waterfront district is never rebuilt. The county buys out the land inside the flood zone and relocates residents and business owners to higher ground, turning the former flood zone into open land. Parks, athletic fields, lagoons, green buffer strips built to absorb the next wave instead of houses. Today, on the site of the block where Carol and Ernest's house once stood, there's an open park looking out over the bay. The land has stayed empty for more than 60 years now, a county decision that no one has ever revisited. This is Geoclysm.